Are you friends with Colleen Ballinger still?
This is the first time that I've talked about this, so I just want to make sure I say my exact piece that I want to say.
Dream guest on my podcast? Oh my gosh. I mean, honestly, let's spice things up. One of my exes. Oh? Good or not? What's been in your head the last 3 days?
Hi everyone, it's me again, and today we're unpacking the world of influencer rebrands with the primary person of study here being Jojo Siwa. While Jojo Siwa is not an influencer in the typical sense, how we normally see them as kind of coming from humble beginnings and becoming internet celebrities, mind you, as the grasp on the masses loosens from mainstream media in favor of online influencers and online content, the description of an influencer changes as more people are moving from making content as celebrities and Hollywood stardom to making internet content on their own terms. With this, we'll unpack Jojo Siwa's rebrand in the sort of influencer culture aspect and show how the phenomenon with Hollywood celebrities in the more traditional fact differs greatly from this sort of direction than people normally go into, and how all of this can be a lot more messy when your personality is the selling point rather than a sort of typical talent. But before we get into that, links, source, and ways to support the channel all down below, along with an email to suggest content. There are also my social medias and fun things down there, and links to Amazon wishlist, Patreon, and YouTube members. I also want to thank my current YouTube members and patrons. Names on the screen. Keeping it quick today, 3 parts to the video. Part 1, Jojo Siwa's rebrand. We're just going to kind of go through the steps and controversies and what led us here. Part 2, we're going to talk about other influencer rebrands and what that meant for them and why they did them in the first place. And finally, to sum off a kind of rhetoric section, Part 3, the celebrity commodity versus the influencer commodity. I also want to address a sort of comment that I got the other day that really irked me. Someone said that I constantly misdefine or misunderstand rhetoric. I've quote unquote never once used it properly. Today we're going to be talking about kind of postmodernism in the concept of rhetoric and the way that it interacts with culture and media and celebrity. If you knew anything about rhetoric and you studied rhetoric foundationally, then one of the first lessons that you get from it is that rhetoric is everywhere around us. It even boils down to something as simple as you discussing with your friend at the grocery store what type of meat you should be buying for the sandwiches. That act of convincing and having a discourse, while has a minimal effect and a minimal audience, is still an act of rhetoric in and of itself. Rhetoric by its own means and by its own definitions, especially when we're talking about postmodernism, expands across all discourse and just kind of what's the upper hand, who's saying these things, why are they saying things in a certain way, and what the result is. So I just get a little bit frustrated when someone will call in to question kind of everything that I know, I highly doubt if someone had a degree in math, you'd go, you don't even know how to do math. You don't even know what math means. So I'm saying that now to keep it a stack and to defend myself a little bit in regards to the sense of that I'm here to sway people by any means or to do that. And I know that comments should not affect me like that. I just think when someone says, I don't even understand the basic concept of something that I spent years studying, have graduated with honors distinction in, and I've written multiple different research papers using that as an angle, and have done all these videos, I don't want people to think that I am doing this with no concept as to what I'm talking about. So that is all. Part 1, Jojo Siwa's rebrand. So if you go onto any social media right now, it seems that the only thing kind of going on in the silly influencer space is Jojo Siwa wilding out on the timeline, whether that be people commenting on it or Jojo Siwa posting herself. And please understand that I clearly am no better. Jojo Siwa is attempting to live through what seems to be almost every single kind of fame that you can possibly have. Jojo Siwa's done reality TV. Jojo Siwa's done dancing, child acting, just general performances, has been a judge, and has done like pop star in the like kids sense, like the child entertainer sense, and now wants to move into a more mainstream pop music in the, for lack of a better term, adult sphere. The thing is too, I also find that the description of the rebrand for Jojo Siwa being kind of labeled as an influencer rebrand to be a little bit misleading, because honestly, I would say still to this day, most people know her more so from being a reality star and a Nickelodeon star than being a influencer. So it'd be like the difference between a Josh Peck on David Dobrik's vlogs versus like just Tana Mojo on David Dobrik's vlogs almost, you know, where it's like there's going to be a different context as to how you view them and where they are and what their careers are like, if that makes sense. Of course, I am saying it as an influencer rebrand, as mentioned, because the YouTube algorithm has me in a chokehold. Jojo Siwa has lived through a myriad of different controversies, and I'm not going to relay them all here because iNabber has 2 videos that are over 2 hours long, and Austin Green has a 58-minute video that is just strictly just informative content, like just literally him almost like summarizing every article and video into a very condensed form. So just that's kind of the point of reference if you want to go through them directly, because my focus is not the controversies, because that's been said enough, I think. I don't have anything to add to that. But the general span of the controversies, if you don't feel like checking those things out, is dismissing the trauma of other child reality stars, especially on Dance Moms, overworked a dancer who had a disability in a dance group that she had created called XOMG Pop, to the point that they were literally bleeding out of their belly button, and then dismissed them. And this group had come to fruition from some sort of reality show. Allegedly caused dramatic events to happen within 2 different relationships, kind of just by like public embarrassment and amongst other things. The relationship thing too is more nuanced and deep, so I don't want to really get into that much, so that, again, you can reference the other videos for. There's also defending inappropriate relationships between adults and children, in the context especially of her defending her relationship with Shane Dawson and with Colleen Ballinger. Also saying that everyone was kind of just lying about Colleen Ballinger's inappropriate behavior towards minors and fans, despite the fact that a lot of this stuff was quite literally posted with video evidence, and even if you ignore that, posted via Colleen Ballinger's own channels, either the Colleen Vlogs or the Miranda Sings channel. Jojo Siwa was known through her teen years as a child entertainer with a very child-friendly image and aesthetic. She was known for that really tight side pony with the little bows and the glitter and the pink and the little tutus and Converse. That was kind of like her whole look. And the presentation of JoJo in this way had actually become very iconic and was able to build an empire around this in both online and mainstream media. I actually distinctly remember this like phase in 2018, 2019 where big influencers were like going to like Walmart to go buy like Jojo Siwa themed products because of like the bows coming out. I believe she also had a makeup collection with Claire's. And if I also remember correctly, hypothetically, allegedly Minecraft, and I'll check, I'll put it on screen if I find it. I don't know if hers was one of the ones that had like the asbestos in it. The association was definitely not good, even if it wasn't hers. So essentially what had happened was Jojo Siwa had built like an empire with like kind of these mainstream retailers and mainstream media like Nickelodeon, but also would do collabs with YouTubers and influencers that would then in turn kind of build her up in the online sphere as well, giving her sort of an option to like where to move, because most people are not going to be child entertainers forever. People get really tired of it, especially when they become more mature, and also because kids like to watch videos with other kids in them a lot of the time. So if Jojo C was like 25 in a tutu and glitter on her face, it looks a little bit out of place. In 2021, Jojo Siwa came out as queer. Initially, she referred to herself as gay, but has since said that she's not entirely sure how to define it, kind of saying that she might lie along the lines of like pansexual, but says that she just kind of likes the term queer because of its more so encompassing nature. So that's what I'll refer to her as well. This was a start of what I believe is the start of the major shift in branding. In part, this shift was coming from this because of the inaccurate, I want to say this directly, and homophobic correlation between simply not being straight at all, like just if you're just not straight, and almost becoming like being like hypersexual in a dangerous predatory way. This sentiment is relayed in a lot of the Daily Wire, and no one's surprised that Ben Shapiro and his grifter minions made a point to comment on Jojo Siwa in this context. I'll put a small clip in now. I forgot that it was just an article that Ben Shapiro had written about Jojo Siwa. but also I can't actually look at the article or read the article because Canada has banned news on Facebook, and Daily Wire is considered news for whatever reason, and I can't read the article because it's not available in Canada, and I don't have the VPN right now, so it is what it is. Anyway, this is what I'm referring to. If you don't live in Canada, you can look this up. It's apparently like an article where he just complains about her not being a good role model anymore because she's gay or whatever. Anyway, back to business. But now that you have a sort of position that is for some reason in this day and age controversial, again, which it seems to only be getting worse, which just also boggles my mind to a whole level, but I digress. You are then in turn going to have less of a viability in the child space, because this is just something too that comes into effect when you're teaching as well. I was in Adam McIntyre's live stream chat yesterday, and like I was talking about this there too, where it's like if we're talking about things, for example, like the Israel-Palestine conflict, or you're talking about conflict, and there's a reason why I'm using that term, and I'll get to that in a second, because when you are someone who's a teacher who's a public servant, at least in Canada, this is the case. If you work with children, especially, you are not supposed to have public, strong, divisive opinions. And before people go, I'm a teacher, that's not true, I've worked with multiple school boards, and when you have the contract, the employment contracts, or even the stagiaire contracts, which I don't know what the word for that in English is, internship maybe, there is a section on kind of your acting, how you act on social media, and one of the things is to not have, you need to remain impartial in and out of the classroom by how people can publicly perceive you, which this is why these videos often have caused me a bit of grief, but it's because when there are contexts involving children, the second you step out of line in someone's opinion base, I notice, and this is also just generally from what I can reflect on with Jojo Siwa as well, people will quickly turn on you if you don't follow their opinion. Then all of a sudden, because they want their children to have similar opinions or similar values to them, will then correlate it with danger to the child. So with Jojo Siwa being queer, you have then turned, the noses of a lot of conservatives, a lot of homophobic people, a lot of people who view that like children should not be able to like process or have these feelings. So Jojo, in turn from that, sort of alienated a lot of that child audience, in my opinion. Jojo Siwa, being at the center of another culture war now, pretty much, just kept pushing it, who kept it pushing, and then eventually publicly debuted her first relationship with a girl who was named Kylie. This relationship did not last too long, where eventually she instead left Kylie for a girl named Katie Mills. Now, Katie Mills was somebody who had a pretty predominant TikTok audience and who had a lot of public sightings with Jojo, and it was a really big deal because it was Jojo's first public girlfriend. But that relationship also pretty quickly fizzled out, and then she started dating someone named Avery Cyrus. Avery Cyrus was a very, very public relationship for Jojo Siwa, and also ended pretty badly, to which afterwards Jojo Siwa talked about Katie Mills more specifically, but kind of just in general, that like these girls had like clout chased to date her, which was a really disgusting, dismissive way. And Katie Mills made TikTok videos where I believe Avery Cyrus is also involved at some point, kind of just disputing a lot of these claims that Jojo had, which this was kind of a first piece of the perception on Jojo's changing. Because the way that the girlfriends were treated and the public perception around that was a pretty big deal outside of the grifters, and like the right-wing people, because more or less the response to Jojo coming out from people not like that was pretty positive. Even from that point, Jojo was only controversial in sort of smaller communities online, but then came the Howie Mandel podcast interview last summer amid the Colleen Ballinger controversy. Many were asking those who were close to Colleen to comment on what was happening, where the controversy, especially to super long story short, I have like 3 videos on it. Colleen Ballinger was a YouTuber, is a YouTuber, she still vlogs, who had a character named Miranda Sings that was targeted towards children. She claims that it's not true. That was found to be not true a ton of times. And this character was very inappropriate around a lot of younger influencers and young fans. On video, one of those people she was inappropriate with was Jojo Siwa. And because one of the people that she was inappropriate with was Jojo Siwa, and Jojo Siwa wasn't really saying anything, a lot of people were really curious as to what was going on. So Howie Mandel, when he had Jojo Siwa on his podcast, asked her. And the general expectation around Jojo Siwa's response was that, especially because this was after the ukulele apology had happened, the infamous ukulele thing, many expected that Jojo was going to say, kind of just say like, yeah, she did that. I don't talk to her anymore. It's disgusting, kind of whatever, something like that. Or to kind of just dodge it entirely. But not only did she not do that, she went the opposite way and defended Colleen, doubled down on Colleen's claiming that she was innocent, and also even went as far as to say that it was just lies that were spread online, despite the fact that a lot of these allegations were from clips on Colleen's own channel.
The internet can take a lie and run so far with it, so far that it's to the point where you just can't do anything about it. And I've had that happen to me. And I know Colleen very, very, very well. And I think the work that Colleen has done for the internet is incredible. I think her creativity is incredible. Miranda Sings is a character, is a comedian. And I think that it's very hard to be a character where people are also looking at you as you're a real human behind that character. And I think being a comedian is very hard because you were able to do things years ago that were okay, and now that we've grown and we've matured, we've realized that they're not okay. You know what I mean?
But you, as somebody who's been in the public eye for a long time,
Yes.
Do you think that it is appropriate to communicate openly with everybody that reaches out to you?
No, I don't think that communicating with fans is, you got to be careful to not
what I'm saying,
to not blur a friend-fan line. It's very tough.
And here's my question to you. Regardless of judging whatever specifically is being said that was happening, and I'm just saying this as a parent again. You said you started communicating with her when you were 12.
Yes.
You want to be
But you guys were in the same industry.
So we were in the
like,
same.
You guys were making videos and stuff together,
So
right?
we actually met because on Dance Moms, do you know Tadra Hall?
Yes.
So on Dance Moms, Tadra Hall had a party and invited the Dance Moms cast, and 4 of the girls went, and they discluded myself and Nia, who is another girl on the show. And we all knew Tadra, so we were fine with that. But then Colleen, as Miranda, surprised the girls. And me and Nia were devastated because we were massive fans, and we loved Colleen and we loved Miranda. And then when the episode came out, Colleen saw how upset me and Nia were. And she reached out to Holly and was like, I would love to make this up to you guys. She was like, I was wondering where Jojo and Nia were. I had no idea that this was the case. Please, whatever you guys want. I just want to make the kids happy. I just want Jojo and Nia to not be sad anymore. And so we ended up going to dinner with Colleen, and it was me and my mom and Nia and Holly. And Colleen was telling me that night about YouTube and how her whole family did it and how it was awesome and she vlogs her life. And that night is when I went home and I made my YouTube channel and decided that that was going to be my career, essentially.
Then Jojo Siwa's kind of online perception began to tank further with the information coming out about XOMG Pop and the way that she treated other dancers, especially when her career came up from people publicly seeing how she was treated by Abby Lee Miller on Dance Moms and seeing how Miller was treating her. And then for her to kind of just continue that cycle of trauma to performers was something that a lot of people found to be very distasteful. This is a bit confusing, and there's an article about it on Rolling Stone, but you can't read those for free a lot of times, especially if you've already hit the max. So I'm going to put in a small clip from Austin Green's video.
Let's talk about the controversy surrounding XOMG Pop, which began after JoJo and her mom ran a music and dance reality TV show that narrowed a group of 11 girls down into 7 members of the new all-girls pop group XOMG Pop. Following this, in May 2022, the group performed on America's Got Talent. and made it all the way to the semifinals. The real problems began about a year later, on May 17th, 2023, when one of the group's members, Leah Sanderson, announced on Instagram that she'd be leaving the group. Previously, Jojo had made comments like this.
You're not gonna sit in the studio, pout in the corner, be a bitch to my mom, and then expect me to like you.
Leading critics to believe that Jojo was being ableist for firing the 16-year-old who has a neural tube defect called spina bifida. Shortly after Leia announced her departure, fans became upset with Jojo after photos posted of her and the 5 remaining girls in the group at Jojo's birthday party, all holding up a 5. However, this controversy was nothing in comparison to what came out on February 13th, 2024, when the Rolling Stone published an article titled, Jojo Siwa Promised Them Pop Stardom. They say they were thrown in the trash. It begins by going through Leia Sanderson's difficult time growing up, frequently being in and out of the hospital, undergoing dozens of surgeries, even using a catheter to go to the bathroom since age 5. Leia overcame insane odds, while also becoming one of the best dancers in the country. And when offered the opportunity to appear on Jojo Siwa's reality dance competition, her family couldn't pass it up. The article says, Sanderson's mother, Angie, had some reservations. Because Leia was a minor, Angie would have to leave her other 3 older kids behind in Texas to accompany Leia to Los Angeles. She'd also have to shut down the daycare center she owned. But she and her husband, Cody, talked it over and decided it was too good of an opportunity to pass up. A person with spina bifida shouldn't be able to do the things that she's doing, Cody says. We never know, from day to day, if this may be her last time to step on stage. So we have to take every opportunity we can. In the early spring of 2021, Angie and Leia flew to LA to appear in the series. The 2 years that followed, according to the Sandersons, were the exact opposite of what Leia had dreamed about as a little girl. They go on to explain the awful things Jessalyn Siwa subjected them to. The Sandersons, as well as multiple sources close to the production, alleged that the Siwas subjected the children to grueling rehearsals, sometimes foregoing school breaks, with meager compensation. They also allege Sanderson was forced to work under intense physical duress, with Jessalyn encouraging her to attend a video shoot just a few weeks after she underwent spinal cord surgery. In one instance, just days before the surgery, they allege Leia started bleeding through her belly button during a rehearsal for a performance at the Children's and Family Emmys, which was hosted by Jojo. Rather than encourage her to take a break, the Sandersons say Jessalyn told her to put a maxi pad on it, so it wouldn't leak onto her costume. Also adding that they allege that Jessalyn was overtly cruel, calling them names and, in one instance, shaming them for having a disability. Jojo, meanwhile, could also be nasty and domineering, according to sources, a sharp contrast from her upbeat on-screen persona. At one point, they allege, she screamed insults at the girls during a performance. They also allege that she played a role in helping to build a cutthroat environment, long after the cameras were gone, playing favorites and pitting members against each other.
Not much happened since then, except a couple of cringy TikToks, especially Jojo Siwa's Doug the Bounty Hunter trucker era looking thing, which I'll put a picture of on screen, or my favorite TikTok of all time, perhaps, which is very, very short segue. The other day, I had a doctor's appointment last Friday or something on the 4th or 5th of April, whatever it was. Anyway, and it's my doctor, Canada Core, because once you get your hands on a family doctor, my doctor's a 3-hour drive from me. Anyway, so the whole way driving, I was like scream singing because I was alone. The next 3 days after that, my voice was fried. I sound like I was like a chain smoker. So what I kept doing was a Jojo Siwa impression of her singing Traitor by Olivia Rodrigo. Now, obviously, I can't put in most of the clip, but I'll put in the tiny part that I kept doing over and over and over again and definitely annoying everyone around me. Then came the trailer for the Rebrand, claiming that it was going to almost be some sort of badass era. There was going to be coarse language or something. Ooh. And that there was going to be just it had always been giving Bangers era by Miley Cyrus, and the goal seemed to have been to make her seem like she is now this like edgy, cool, interesting celebrity, and I'm ditching the image of the child actor, which is not something we haven't seen time and time again anyway. But finally, to begin this rebrand, Jojo Siwa releases a song called Karma while also walking around looking like a off-brand Gene Simmons from Kiss. And you now have this sort of dunking on her arc from most people, I would say. And she releases this song called Karma. And this song Karma which people were starting to claim was stolen because someone found a version by someone named Britt Smith from 12 years ago. Now, here's the tea on that, though, because I also knew this from before. I think it's because there was a lot of songs that, like, let's say, like, Katy Perry bought in, like, for Teenage Dream that were supposed to go to other people. I feel like Last Friday Night was one of them. With that, you have these different versions that you can find. There's versions of songs that are sung by, like, Ariana Grande that she never actually took, Lady Gaga. I've heard some of them before, so I had kind of already known that this was a thing. But all that happened, essentially, was JoJo was saying she wanted to release a song, it's Rock Mafia wrote it, which, if you remember, that I think that producer tag or whatever is at the beginning of Can't Be Tamed by Miley Cyrus. I feel like I'm not crazy. Hold on. Yeah, it's right there. I found it. Okay, see, I know stuff sometimes. Look at that. So it's a group that writes and produces music, more or less. And JoJo just bought the song and used it and tweaked some of the lyrics a little bit. Very little tweaking had been done. Anyway, so what happened after, because of the set of controversies, people knowing that JoJo was very controversial and seems to very mistreat a lot of people around her, to which also she's been going on all of these, like, this press tour and is trying to almost rage bait, which people think is really annoying. And I don't know why I neglected this from the script, but another controversy that JoJo had, which I actually remember happening live and I almost made a video on, where Jojo Siwa was pretending to be pregnant on Snapchat. Just a bunch of pictures of, like, her stomach and stuff. And I remember showing my boyfriend when it was happening, just being like, is this for real? Because also she'd already come out as gay by then. And, like, had no interest in, like, dating men, it seemed. And then also, like, didn't have any partners and it was just kind of completely coming out of nowhere. And it was all fake, and then no one talked about it. So people kind of understanding those controversies and then seeing this sort of, like, definitely wannabe Miley Cyrus moment. Because Can't Be Tamed was the start of that sort of shift era, which was also a Rock Mafia song, which I think is kind of based, actually, now that I think about it. But once it was released, Britt Smith re-released her version that actually also was produced by Timbaland. And Britt is a actual, like, singer, so the song is way better and has already surpassed Karma by Jojo Siwa on iTunes. And presumably other charts as well. But when I was looking up, I found iTunes. Now, this is also something that nobody else brought up. I just want to see, I'm just going to put them on screen just because I'm, like, curious on what the vibes are like. Is it just me, or does the Jojo Siwa cover look a lot like the cover of, like, that Tana Mojo song she released in, like, 2020? You know, I know that I shouldn't care, but I can't breathe without you. That one. Anyway. I have them on screen, obviously, anyway. So this is where we're at right now. But before we do that, I just want to add this, like, absolutely bananas tweet that I saw, a little Tay tweet about Jojo Siwa, and I just have to read it because I'm dying. I'm going to have it on screen, obviously, but I need to read it off my phone. So she just tags her. Just, like, main screen tweet. At Jojo Siwa, I'm going to have to censor myself a lot, so it's going to be funny anyway. You're a scary ass bitch if you have something to say about me. Say it, and this time don't delete your comment or unlike shady tweets. Don't let those paid YouTube views and botted Spotify streams get to your head, Madonna from Dollar Tree ass bitch. and then somebody had a picture of the tweet that Jojo liked. I just thought that was incredibly iconic. I thought it was very funny. Anywho, part 2, other influencer rebrands. So this part is going to involve a lot more of, like, my sort of connecting the dots and other such, like, thought processes. So if we think about in 2018, Shane Dawson did a 180 rebrand from the conspiracy videos to making these sort of documentary series style videos that were very, very long. And one of the first ones he did, or the first one he did, was with Graveyard Girl. Can't remember if his first one was Trisha Paytas or if it was Graveyard Girl. But anyway, who was one of the OG YouTube creators and one of the OGs that was sort of falling to irrelevancy. After what I consider to be, like, the peak influencer era, which is, like, 2015 to 2018, once prominent creators began to fall to irrelevancy, Graveyard Girl being one of them, and Shane was kind of starting to make this series of, like, kind of trying to almost, like, revive careers of people who were canceled or people who were kind of struggling in this way. The thesis of the documentary, essentially, was Shane Dawson saying to Graveyard Girl that there's kind of a need for, like, constant rebrands in the influencer cycle and that you need to reinvent yourself as the content adapts online. There are many phases to careers of successful influencers. And I'm going to talk about just some of the big influencers and the different phases that they had. So for Shane, for example, he did the comedy videos. I'm using that extremely loosely. He did films, also very loosely. Then he did sort of lifestyle and collab videos. He did food reviews. He did conspiracy videos. Then he did the documentary videos. And now he does a podcast with Ryland, I believe, and the guy who films the videos, I think. Then there's also Tana Mojo, who did the storytime videos. Then she moved to sort of vlogs. She did hauls for a while. She did the MTV series that was very controversial because it showed Tana in a pretty negative light. And she now does the Cancelled podcast. We've moved to James Charles. James Charles did YouTube tutorials. Then he moved to challenge videos. Then he had that sort of era where he was consistently making content with TikTokers, but on YouTube. And now is kind of in his like TikToker brand owner era. And James Charles is also trying to kind of move into the mainstream music space, even though he looks like this when he sings. And the faces that he makes are my sleep paralysis demons and have been for quite some time. Then we have Colleen Ballinger as well, who moved from the Miranda Sings kind of comedy videos, again, very, very loose, to a mommy vlogger, because morality is the scariest thing to have for Miranda, clearly, or Colleen, rather. Colleen looks at being ethical and says, I'm gonna let anybody but me do that, I think. I want to kind of introduce the concept of like the rhetoric in a public address, and I'm gonna read from my rhetoric textbook. I'm gonna utilize this textbook a lot more as I continue to read through my books, because I'm noticing that some of the things I was bringing up were conceptually very complicated, and I want to kind of get back to the basics for people who are coming in, and then we can kind of grow as a group, you know? So rhetoric in the public address. In a similar vein, some theorists contend that rhetoric is concerned with public address, and others use a rhetorical perspective to effectively study film, television, interpersonal communication, and other forms of communication. In its earliest conception, of course, the public address was a form of rhetoric most widely used, studied, and taught. As orators began transmitting messages via radio, television, and the internet, the nature of the public event changed. Today, it is almost impossible and perhaps ineffective to study the specific speaking event exclusively. Critics must also consider the medium's influence and the large audience exposed to the speech. Doing so, however, blurs the line between the public address and other forms of communication. Although it is easy to see how the President's State of Union address is rhetoric, it is problematic to say that a photo opportunity on an aircraft carrier is not. From there, it is not much of a stretch to also claim that television, film, advertising, and content on the internet are rhetorical as well. This is what I was talking about when I was defending myself earlier. These things are, in turn, rhetorical in how they deliver their messages. We also need to talk about kind of rhetoric in postmodernism and modern media, which I did discuss at the very beginning of the video. Media has kind of oversaturated our entire lives. I think more so now than ever because of the removal of third spaces and this sort of post-lockdown loneliness era. And what I mean by that is no longer is the priority of cityscapes being parks, free events, free shows, and ways for people to gather together in places like community centers. Rather, the primary objective for people is to have the best personal private living spaces possible, the best ways to consume content, whether that be the newest phone, the newest device, having the iPads, having the Apple ecosystem, having the phones that flip into like giant screens so you can further consume your media more effectively. Things like Discord and Team Chat, if that still exists, but all these other like callers and things like softwares for calling people and stuff like that. You are talking to people to consume media together, whether that be video games, films, YouTube videos, television shows. And as that's sort of taken over the free time of the masses, it has had more pull on our perceptions of, and the consumption in which we have is the center of our lives. Social media is the same way now, where it's oversaturated and also overconsumed. So on one hand, there is this ethos of a constant need for more, a constant need for more content, a constant need for more influencers and more creators, while on the other side, there is a constant need to shift and be the first to do something to get the first in that pool of money because it is finite. And I want to read a little bit more about this in my rhetoric textbook, but I also want to end this kind of little thought process I had with thinking about how many big YouTubers have fallen to irrelevancy. If you think about YouTube as a platform, it feels more and more like there's just a few huge people that kind of get the most money and the most success and that still retain that. But you're hearing tons and tons of influencers being like, well, I have to go get a second job. I have to go back to work. I have to go back and get a kind of normal, like quote unquote, like normal job. And there's this sort of group in the middle that's like, oh, I mean, I make videos and I'm seemingly successful to you and by the old parameters, but I still have to live a very modest lifestyle, even though I'm getting tens of thousands of views that even 5 years ago would have made you very rich. So I think that that's something to also consider in this regard. Now, let's talk about these sorts of content creation styles and other kind of terms, right? So if we talk about Jojo Siwa's kind of attempt to redo the Bangers era by Miley Cyrus, which was also not a new thing to happen. There were lots of child stars that had their very edgy era. I'm even thinking kind of like 1990s Drew Barrymore, things like that. It says the following: while niche markets are created and symbolic value prevails, fixed meanings are becoming more difficult to associate. In a constant drive to make products novel, interesting, and unusual, consumers and consumer industries participate in recycling the past, attempting to put a new spin on something old. This aids in blurring boundaries, which is other characteristics of a postmodern world. While co-opting something from the past, oftentimes the original meaning is lost. For instance, Mohawk Native Americans shave the sides of their heads preparing for battle. However, this hairstyle adopted a new meaning during the 1980s punk fashion, and yet other meaning is attributed when a 3-year-old boy dons the style today. Other styles from the past may be considered distasteful or tacky, but are embracing an ironic twist to parody by today's standards. This is known as kitsch, where people know the past and appreciate out-of-place nature of the object. An example that comes to mind are pink elastic flamingos, first created in 1957 as lawn ornaments, used to differentiate mid-century suburban homes that virtually look the same. Often used for a specific purpose, people have now taken them as a throwback to that period, essentially lightheartedly gawking at them in the 1950s charm. Jameson noted that kitsch had become less significant, but instead pastiche proliferates the postmodern era. Rather than drawing from the original meaning, objects' meanings are fused or merge to create new meanings. In the 1980s, for instance, Madonna often used a bustier or corn bra as a costume, harkening back to the Victorian England and the 1950s underwear as 1980s underwear. In 2010, Lady Gaga wore a dress made of raw beef to the MTV Video Music Awards. Both examples evince a new meaning from an old established product. While the meat dress did not open a new market to selling to consumers, the bustier as an outside garment certainly did. Even in 2017, the style was brought back as fashionable. And that's true too, because if you think of how many, if you go to like Urban Outfitters, you go to Dynamite, you go to Garage, you go to, what are the stores, Aeropostale, Hollister, all those kind of stores for young adults, H&M, there are tons and tons and tons of corset tops, which are a form of a bustier, essentially. It's kind of the same kind of vibe with the boning and everything like that. That's just a further extension of that fashion. Music is another era in which postmodernism is obvious, as it recycles the past and serves several examples of pastiche. In the modern era, it is much easier to clearly define and categorize music genre, example jazz, rock, classical, country, etc. However, in an attempt to draw a bigger audience to appeal a wide variety of tastes, artists have blurred music genre boundaries, seeking new markets and attracting previously untapped consumers. Darius Rucker, for instance, became famous in the 1990s as the lead singer of the band Hootie and the Blowfish. However, in 2008, he went solo in the country music genre. Rock band Aerosmith shocked the music industry when they teamed up with hip-hop rapper Run DMC on their song Walk This Way. Since then, Aerosmith leader Steven Tyler has crossed over to country, creating country rock. And it just talks about more versions of this. So JoJo, as we can see, as a prime example, fits this in multiple ways because she's also more aligned in the kind of celebrity space. But if we even think about music and the recycling of the time and things like that, it's kind of very interesting when we think about how she bought a song from 2012. Because if you think about the song Karma and producing by Timbaland, like that's the guy. That is the guy for early 2000s music. He has that song with Katy Perry that goes, I'll never be... I'm just singing too much today. But like, if you're born like the early 2000s and you see this album cover, like, it's time to wild out, right? But this guy is the one who produced the song that Jojo Siwa bought originally. So it's this sort of like revival of that kind of past sounds through the revival of the era that Miley Cyrus had with an aesthetic from Gene Simmons, kind of looking like a very Kiss type of aesthetic. It's just a lot of blending and blurring of these lines, which is very synonymous with the postmodern era. So part 3, we're going to talk about the sort of celebrity commodity versus the influencer commodity and how that ties into the different types of rebrands that have to be done. Now, this is relevant in regard to the way that your rebrand is seen, right? because celebrity of an influencer, like the fame retention that they have, can slip through their fingers a lot more. Celebrities in the mainstream sense, in the traditional sense, if you've hit a certain threshold, a threshold audience comparable to many influencers, if we're going to be realistic, if you've surpassed a certain threshold, you've been in an Oscar-winning movie, you've been in a Broadway musical as an already established actor, you know, whatever. The fall to irrelevancy is what is much more difficult, and if sometimes even impossible. Like, I think today, if Justin Bieber, for example, never made another song, would still be recognizable in public 30 years down the line. With JoJo, because she was just at the cusp, I feel like, of that truly recognizable celebrity, because unfortunately the reality is the retention that you can have in the child space is not the same as the adult space. And I don't mean adult entertainment like that kind. I mean adult, like, you know, making Good Will Hunting or something, you know. With the boom of reality TV during the writer's strike in the mid 2000s, you have a new era of people coming up. But if you think about them, those are the closest to a sort of social media figure than actors. Kim Kardashian is a much more influencer type personality than, let's say, Jennifer Love Hewitt. I don't know why that's the first one I think of, or Drew Barrymore now, or Kelly Clarkson, or Channing Tatum, or Idris Elba. I'm just not very good at thinking of actors, so I don't watch stuff like that very often anymore. Anyway, you've created a new type of personality and a new form of celebrity that then sort of transitioned into the influencer realm. And it's funny how truly disconnected that still is when you think of people like, for example, like Taylor Swift, who makes the most cringe TikToks ever. Like, let's be real. Like, Taylor Swift really says millennial pause, and I'm gonna take that up 6 notches. Like, the way she makes it just feels very disconnected from the average folk, if you will. There's just something about, but the way that she approaches content, the way that there just feels like there's a different disconnect. It's the same thing as Ben Affleck on social media when he tried the Raya thing, and he's like, "It's me, Ben," like this. There's always going to be this feeling of difference when Olivia Rodrigo makes a TikTok versus when Madison Beer makes a TikTok, even though Madison Beer also can kind of blur that line sometimes. Jojo Siwa had talent in the more traditional way, but still somehow struggled to kind of transcend and instead shifted into the influencer space, which also has its benefits. I'm talking like all influencers are going to like rot and that there's no benefit to it. You have way more control over your own terms. You have way more control over how your art is distributed. You have way more control over how you are going to be perceived, how good or bad you're going to act publicly, because you're not kind of under the claws of a PR firm in the same way. The other thing is too, when you're an influencer and if people hear that you have PR, sometimes it kind of breaks that sort of commodity of the personality. And I've talked about this before. Because celebrities in the traditional sense, like I'm kind of joking about Taylor Swift's TikToks being kind of cringe, it's because she doesn't need to make TikToks to be famous. That's like the last thing she needs to do. That's kind of just a side thing. Taylor Swift sings and makes music as a job, right? And that is like where she actually lines up. But TikTokers, the commodity often is their personality, because a lot of what makes them famous is not talent that is hyper unique to them. Now, while a lot of them came up, for example, from dancing, like Charli D'Amelio, the types of dances that she was doing were very easily duplicated by the average folk. She wasn't doing interpretive dance that takes years and years of practice to be able to effectively do as her main growth on TikTok. So when you think of things like that, the attainability is also going to be a huge difference. So when influencers have like PR firms or something, it kind of feels distasteful and against the commodity of their personality as opposed to the commodity of the talent. I want to talk about Baudrillard's 4 stages of representation and the kind of concept of celebrity culture. So again, the reading's on screen. So it says, Baudrillard's 4 stages of representation works in our celebrity culture as well. Celebrities are people who play characters. Thus, through music videos, talk shows, interviews, and celebrity gossip programs, the media make consumers think they know celebrities. These mediated appearances suggest that they are presenting their real selves. Yet, consumers are encouraged to ignore the makeup, plastic surgery, fitness training, stylists, and public relations consultants creating the celebrities. And this is one of those distinct differences between the modern celebrity, like the traditional modern celebrity, versus the influencer celebrity, right? The facade is a universally known thing in traditional media. But if you tell somebody that the way that you act in a YouTube video isn't the way that you act in real life, that can actually truly harm the reach that you have. We'll demonstrate with Lady Gaga, whose birth name is Stephanie Joanne Angelica Germanotta. Is Italian. I'm not Italian. Leave me alone. In Baudrillard's first stage of representation, we could see Lee Conan interview her on CBS Monday Morning from November 27, 2016. In this emotional, revealing interview, viewers were encouraged to believe that they were getting to know Gaga / Germanotta as she opened up, shared her feelings, and cried on camera. In his second stage of representation, viewers may critically question what is hidden or not evident. As she spoke on camera and cried, was she still performing as Gaga? What do we not know about Germanotta? The third stage of representation for Baudrillard does not distinguish between the mediated images and reality, since we are living in a media-saturated world. Hence, the performance of Gaga / Germanotta demonstrated on CBS Sunday Morning was just as real as her stage performances, which are just as real as her performances walking down the street. Thus, the venue or action doesn't matter. Germanotta is Gaga. The fourth stage of interpretation of Gaga as hyperreal, since we can't know her outside of media. Even if we meet her on the street, her mediated self stays with us. This hyperreality is also evident when celebrities die, since thousands of people mourn as if they were close friends to the celebrity. But with influencers, when they rebrand, it puts people often in a position to question if what made them famous was their authentic self in the first place, because that is often what people are looking for. This is why that sort of constant rebranding you're seeing with a lot of these influencers often lines with them needing to get out of a set of controversy, because they want the controversy to seem like the part of them that isn't realistic and the part of them that isn't actually tied to them as a person. They want that to sort of exist as a hyperreality, as something that is what you're seeing, but not the true reality. And that's why when we talk about things like when I talked about in my Rhetoric or Dramageddon 1 video, Jeffree Star's manipulative racism apology, he is utilizing the concept that social media cannot present who I truly am as a way to make a veil, despite the fact that him being one of the most prominent and earliest social media figures and the way that he's presented himself, it is actually more than likely that that is a more authentic portion, because he wasn't brought up from specific talent throughout his whole career in the same way that somebody like Jennifer Lawrence was, or somebody like Beyonce, or somebody like Drake, or people like that, you know? Anyway, with that, I'm going to conclude. Today, we talked about kind of Jojo Siwa's rebrand. We talked about how other influencers rebrand. We talked about the concept of how postmodernism views the rhetoric and the way that we view the celebrity. And we kind of closed off with some more rhetoric about hyperreality and how we see the person as the perceived image presented to us in media, even though we also kind of know that that's not true. Links, source, and ways to support the channel all down below, including Amazon, YouTube memberships, and Patreon. Thank you again to my current YouTuber members and patrons. I am going to hopefully be able to upload the lost episode of my podcast with my friend Elle as a perk video for you soon. I'm gone for the next few days, however, so we'll see what that happens. Thank you all for watching. It has been a fun time. Jojo Siwa still being silly, but it's kind of fun to talk about. I hope you all have an amazing day, and I'll see you when I see you. Bye!
Get ready with me to get on Ozempic. Get ready with me to ask my mother why she never loves me. Get ready with me to come out as a lesbian. Get ready with me to hide from the cops. FBI, open up! Get ready with me to go out tonight, get super drunk, and then hopefully get arrested. Get ready with me to gobble up your man like a Thanksgiving turkey. Get ready with me to stop being a hoe and find Jesus. Get ready with me... Hello?
Hey, you fucking badass bitch.
Anyway, get ready with me featuring a whole bunch of products that I stole from the store. Get ready with me to sleep with your grandfather. Get ready with me, or don't, bitch. I don't give a fuck. Get ready with me to... Did that take me off the naughty list, Sienna? Oh shit. Get ready with me to apologize to poor Mrs. Claus. Get ready with me to go get dinner with your dad. Get ready with me to slash my ex-boyfriend's tires. Okay, get ready with me to look prettier and skinnier than everyone else. Get ready with me to get my ears double pierced at Home Depot. Get ready with me to go get a BBL. I'm just kidding, I'm literally going to Target. I wish so, right?